people harming themselves, and many souls are filthy. The court service says it's trying to improve things. Isn't satisfied.
Magistrates and judges would be absolutely...
That makes people want to recommend VTech Automotive. Once you've experienced their thorough, honest work, you'll want to pass it on too. Their brand new MOT.
Don't use it, things are rusting up. You know. Oh! Look, you stupid old farts!
Fuck. Oh, Jesus, man.
Jany.
O matko, walnął.
Tak.
Hang on. No, stay there. Stay there. No, stay there. Stay there.
Woman. Yeah. Two.
This is always a good show, but I promise you, tonight is going to be a classic. This, at least part of it, will be played, if not forevermore, then for a very, very long time. Because there's an interview with the only substitute we could get. Owen Smith co-leader Andy Slaughter MP for Hammersmith. And I promise you, you've never heard anything quite like it. Well, first let me make this official announcement. We contacted Owen Smith's office earlier this week for an interview. After much chasing and early indications it was unlikely to happen, we finally got confirmation late this morning that we would be unable to interview him tonight. But we've already put in a request for him to appear on this show next week. We did have one of his surrogates, a woman called Jane Chapman, MP, Jenny Chapman, MP for Darlington, I think, forgive me. I had forgotten her already. And she gave some startling comments that went wild on the internet and certainly travelled far amongst Labour Party members. But you ain't seen nothing yet. Wait till you hear Andy Slaughter, my own MP, actually. I voted for him last time in the Hammersmith constituency. So we're talking about the ongoing coup against Jeremy Corbyn, which reached its nadir, you might say, in the High Court this week, when the biggest friend of Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israel, a Mr. Foster, a multi-millionaire failed Labour candidate under Ed Miliband, took the party to court at vast expense to try and get a High Court judge to throw the leader of the Labour Party off the ballot paper in the contest for the leadership of the Labour Party. Ordinarily, you wouldn't be able to make that kind of story up. But I'm afraid this coup against Corbyn gets curiouser and curiouser. You remember, it's only a couple of weeks ago, that we were told that Angela Eagle would be the finest leader Labour could possibly imagine, and that it was time at last, for a woman leader of the Labour Party. All the propaganda guns were moved into position. All the columnists, especially the feminist ones, like Polly Toynbee in The Guardian, were wheeled out to tell us that Angela Eagle's time has come. And then she was elbowed out of the way by a man called Owen Smith, about whom few of us know much, and he's doing his best to make sure that the very large audience of this radio programme at least don't get to know very much at all, because he's running and hiding from an appearance on this show. But I have to tell you, in the words of the then Cassius Clay, later Muhammad Ali, when he went looking for the big ugly bear, Sonny Liston, we're coming after you, Owen. And don't be surprised if I pop up with a microphone for talk radio just when you least expect it, because I'm giving up hope that you're going to have the courage as the leader of the chicken coup to come in front of this show. Talking about the coup against Corbyn in the first hour, Labour leadership contender Owen Smith caused controversy earlier this week as he made a major policy speech in Rotherham, attacking Theresa May.
And I'll be honest with you, it pained me that we didn't have the strength and the power and the vitality to smash her back on her heels and argue that these are our values, these are our people, this is our language that they are seeking to steal.
He was forced to apologise after he was accused of using misogynistic and aggressive language towards the Prime Minister.
I'm a robust politician and I will use robust language, but I was talking obviously about the rhetoric from the Tory party, the ideology of the Tory party, the ideas of the Tory party, not the person of Theresa May.
Well, he never uses one word when 100 will do. Meanwhile, in an interview with Sky News, Mr. Smith talked about the problems with misogyny that are rife, he said, in the Labour Party and in the UK on the whole.
I think we've seen a growth of misogyny in the party. That's definitely true. We've seen, rape threats against women. All of these things should be deeply concerning to us. And I think we have seen more intolerance, greater racism in the country at large. Now, that's something we've got to try and change. We can change that through legislation. We can change it through change in culture.
In an appearance on Newsnight on Monday, he was forced to justify his place in the leadership competition after claims that the foundations of his campaign were shaking.
Well, I think Jeremy, to be honest, doesn't really understand sometimes the way in which people have a very strong, perhaps socially conservative with a small c, sense of place, sense of where they're from. I'm not sure I've heard him talking much about Scotland and identity, or about Wales and identity, or indeed about England and identity. I suspect that Jeremy's got a rather more metropolitan sense of that, and that's not one I think is central to the Labour tradition.
Are you calling him unpatriotic?
I'm saying that I think it's not something that is core to his set of beliefs. I think he's got a set of liberal perspectives and left perspectives on things, and nationhood and nationalism and patriotism aren't really part of his makeup. I think the truth is that the reason I stood was in order to try and unite the Labour Party. We had obviously a massive crisis of confidence in the Parliamentary Labour Party in Jeremy. The job of the leader of the Labour Party is to lead united opposition at Westminster, or to lead a government at Westminster. He couldn't do that. Most of those MPs now have nominated me overwhelmingly to challenge Jeremy.
Well, that was the man himself. As I said earlier, we gave him every opportunity all week and all last week too to come on this show, but he was unable to make it. However, just like last week, he did put someone up to speak for him. My own MP, actually, Andy Slaughter, the Member of Parliament for Hammersmith. I give you this fair warning. You've never heard anything quite like this. Andy Slaughter, what's a nice guy like you getting involved in a thing like this coup?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Yeah.
The coup against the Labour leader. You may have read about it.
No, I think you're misunderstanding there, George. This is a leadership election in the Labour Party.
It's a challenge to a leader that's only been in 10 months. That's usually described as a coup, isn't it?
Well, I mean, you can use whatever emotive language you want, but it's perfectly within the rules for there to be a challenge.
Well, let me tell you what I mean. You're a big supporter of the Palestinians. How do you feel about the fact that every supporter of Israel in the land is rooting for Corbyn's political demise?
I really think that if that's the sort of attitude you're going to take to this, then we're not going to have a very sensible conversation.
Are you ending the conversation, Andy?
No, I'm not ending the conversation. I'm just saying. I mean, what I was asked to do was to come and comment on the Labour leadership campaign, which is, I'm sure it's something that you're familiar with. It's a contest between Owen Smith and Jeremy Corbyn to be the better.
Yes, but I'm asking
leader
you
of the
why.
Labour Party and then Prime Minister.
I'm asking you why you're involved in it, and I gave you one reason why I'm asking you. I'm asking you because you're a supporter of the Palestinians, but every single supporter of Israel in the land is rooting for Jeremy Corbyn's defeat and working hard for it. How do you feel about that?
That's a curious angle to take, if you don't mind my saying. I certainly don't accept the premise there. There are all sorts of reasons why people would be supporting either Owen or Jeremy for the contest.
I'm trying to rescue you from what I promise you will be a YouTube car crash. Let me ask you then a different question.
I'm sorry, I don't even understand what you mean by that.
You will. If Owen Smith is, as he now claims to be, just as radical as Jeremy Corbyn, why are Peter Mandelson, Alistair Campbell, Tim Allen, Portland Communications, and I could go on, why are they backing him?
I think, you live in this weird world of conspiracy theory, George. Most of us don't. And, I'm not really sure what this program is that you do. I thought this was a straightforward interview on a radio station that I was doing here. So, I mean, either ask me some sensible questions or we will end the interview.
Well, the listeners will judge who's being sensible and who's being obtuse or even semi-comatose in this interview. Mm-hmm. I'm asking you a legitimate question that a very large audience will be listening to very soon. And it's this.
I don't know whether that's true or not.
I can assure you that it's true, and you're going to find out just how true it is. Why are Peter Mandelson and Alistair Campbell supporting your candidate, Owen Smith?
Well, I don't have regular conversations with either Peter Mandelson or Alistair Campbell. You may well do. I don't know. There may be the circles that you move in. I don't know.
Have you had a wee pre-prandial?
Sorry, I don't. George, is this a sort of spoof interview or something of that kind? Because I think
it's definitely sounds like a spoof from your end. Let's leave it there. That's Owen Smith's spokesman, Andy Slaughter, the MP for Hammersmith.
Good luck with your career, George. Bye-bye.
Well, there you go. Not sure that Owen will consider that to have been the finest innings batted on his behalf in this campaign, but it shows, I think, along with his own shaky performance on Newsnight, just how shaky the foundations of this entire challenge to Jeremy Corbyn are. This man, Andy Slaughter, has been a Member of Parliament for almost 30 years, and he seemed incapable of even coming to terms with the fact that he was speaking down a radio line to me. Perhaps he thought it would be another of these BBC-type Patsy interviews, where the interviewer puts up a silver platter on which Owen Smith and his surrogates can put any nonsense that they like. But that's not how we work at Talk Radio, and it's definitely not how we work on the mother of all talk shows. My points to him were clear enough, I hope you'll agree, and legitimate. Andy Slaughter has dined out for almost 30 years on being one of the country's supporters of the Palestinian people. Yet he would not even answer my question about the fact that those who take the absolutely diametrically opposite point of view on this subject are all on his side. He wouldn't answer that because he can't answer that, because there is no answer. Owen Smith is currently posing as a kind of young man's Michael Foot. He's trying to persuade us that he's a candidate of the left. He's trying to say, indeed he has said, explicitly, that he's as left-wing as Jeremy Corbyn. And therefore the question, if he's so left-wing, why is Peter Mandelson and Alistair Campbell and Tim Allen and Portland Communications, and I could go on and on and on, why are they all involved in his campaign? Are they campaigning for a new left-wing leader of the Labour Party? Are they campaigning for someone who's going to challenge the very corporate power at whose teats they all suck so profitably? If you believe that, there's a bridge just along the river here that you might be interested in buying off me. If you believe that, you'll believe anything. Now, Andy thought that he could skate through this interview, but he couldn't avoid the truth, which is this. All the worst people in the land, all of them, not everybody that's supporting Smith is bad, but all the worst people in the land are trying to destroy Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. All the media moguls, all the business heads, all the corporate journalists, all the Blairites, all the warmongers, all the defenders of the past 15 or 20 years of war and rendition and torture and occupation are all on the side of Owen Smith. That's something that cannot be gainsaid. There's no getting away from that. And that tells me this. If all these people hate Jeremy Corbyn, that's a pretty good reason for the rest of us to like him. You thought of the mother of all car crash interviews, 0844 499 1000. I thought it was symptomatic of the absolute loss of moorings of the campaign to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn. They couldn't agree on a candidate. None of the frontline candidates that stood last time came forward. None of the bigger names that didn't stand last time but definitely want to be leader of the Labour Party came forward. So they produced from a hat Angela Eagle. They told us she was the best thing since sliced bread. 2 whole weeks of it we had to endure. Then she was ditched in favour of another guy, a former corporate lobbyist with Pfizer, the multinational pharmaceuticals company, which company gave, by the way, £55,000 in a donation to a Labour Party organisation. Imagine, an organisation called Progress, which is fully behind the campaign of Mr. Smith. So then they had to start again. They began by telling us that Corbyn's policies were so unrepresentative that they presided over they presented a case for unelectability, and then he reinvented himself as someone just as left-wing as Jeremy Corbyn. You really couldn't make it up. Let's hear from the listeners. On the line, she's in Cambridge. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Oh, hello, George.
Hi.
I thought that interview with Andy Slaughter was jaw-dropping. He's a bit lacking in the sense of humour department.
I don't know. I don't know if I'd woken him up or he'd
dear.
had a wee drink before dinner or...
Possibly.
I've
Anyway,
no idea. I've never heard anything quite like it.
No, me. I wanted to say, yes, ringing from Cambridge. In Cambridge, we have a Labour MP, Daniel Zeisner. He has a majority of 600 from the last election. He did not take part in the PLP coup, the chicken coup, as you call it. He didn't, because you have to be a bit careful in Cambridge. That would have been a little tricky. But last week he came out, it's in the paper, that he is not supporting Jeremy in the leadership election. He's supporting Owen Smith. And I wrote to him, basically, you've shown your hand, Daniel, really. He hadn't the guts to join in the coup, but he's done it in this underhand way. He is a great supporter of Israel, you're quite right. And I just wanted to add that, in my opinion, this coup is a deliberate scorched earth policy. The establishment, the neocons, the globe, the corporates are desperate to stop Jeremy becoming leader and prime minister, and they'll cause total destruction, as I say, scorched earth, anything to stop it. That's the only way to explain it, because otherwise, why now? So I'm very supportive of the line you're taking on this. And
well, thanks, Sarah. I've never heard of your MP. Who's in second place, 600 votes behind?
Julian Huppert. He was the Lib Dem MP for quite a long time. Very popular, very good, hard-working constituents MP. And he was pipped to the post by Zeisner, who is not in
Because I'll tell you why I'm asking. Because there was an MP in Cambridge before the war, who supported the war.
Yes, but he said afterwards, Iraq cost me my seat. I thought, Iraq
it cost her a seat and it cost 1 million people their life's blood.
Yeah, that's what I said to her. George, well, that lost her a seat. Yes, it did. Just these MPs, they show themselves this lack of moral courage, moral fibre, and people are seeing through it, you know. So just wanted to let you know.
I'm grateful to you, as always, a very eloquent contribution from Cambridge. Go on.
Can I quickly add one thing?
Yes.
2 weeks ago, a group of us formed a protest against the presence here of Madeleine Albright, who came to speak at a Cambridge Cambridge University Department of Politics lecture with the Republican Vin Weber. And group of us, we basically gathered at the entrance to the department where it was and had our banner, 5,000 children, the price worth paying, and we shouted. I can't bear this. The thought of this woman. And
yes.
Anyway, she saw us, and a friend of mine shook her head at her. Basically, what you've done is wrong. And this tiny little figure at the back of the posh car shook her head back. So at least she saw us. We made the point.
Very good. She's the one, as you say, that said on television, on ABC, to Leslie Stahl, the interviewer, who said to her, 550,000 Iraqi children have died as a result of your sanctions. Do you think that's a price worth paying?
It's just terrible, George.
And Madeleine Albright infamously answered, we think it's tough. We think it's a price worth
It's appalling. These people are psychopaths. That is what's so terrifying, and that's what's so terrifying about Hillary Clinton. But I dare say you'll be coming
We'll be coming on to that.
All right.
So I hear that Madeleine Albright's still going. Only the good die young. Right enough. Thanks for that, Sarah in Cambridge. Josie sends a tweet. Not one for listening to radio, but glued to talk radio, just so I can hear George Galloway put the boot into the Labour coup. And will that man answer the questions? Seems to know he's not on BBC. Seems not to know he's not on BBC or ITN or the MSM. Owen Smith is useless. I'm doing my talking And one of the leaders of Owen Smith's coup against Jeremy Corbyn, Andy Slaughter MP, he was talking after a fashion too. You can talk on 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call me. Ray in Pontypridd has, and he's on now. Ray, welcome back.
Good evening, George. How are you?
By the grace of God, I'm good. Thank you.
Can I say, first of all, R.I.P. to Davy Hopper.
A great miners' leader, laid to rest
man.
today. Yes.
A great man indeed. After this High Court ruling this week, Mr. Nobody has got two chances against Jeremy Corbyn. None and Slim. And Slim is out of town.
Very good. World indeed. Ray, thanks. As always, lovely to hear your mellifluous voice from Pontypridd. Let's see. Jane A. says the Andy Slaughter interview is radio gold, George. And Colin says Owen Smith, in his Pfizer background, thinks he provides stiff opposition. How funny. That is one of these Viagra jokes. What is Viagra anyway? What does it look like? Somebody said it's blue. Jeremy Corbyn's recent interview with Owen Jones gave such a well-balanced response to important questions. He's a class above Owen Smith. Owen Smith, Owen Jones, how can you tell the difference? CMAC59 says, it's a coup. The chicken cours have failed, despite the mainstream media and the millionaires behind them. He could not put a sentence together. And Satjinder says Corbyn's slaughter was quite literally slaughtered. If he is actually Smith's press officer, I think he's doomed. Well, Satjinder, he's not his press officer. Andy Slaughter is one of the leaders of the coup against Jeremy Corbyn. He's one of the top parliamentary men in Owen Smith's corner. And if that tonight was the best that he could do, then you have to say, I mean, I get the impression all the time. I got it on Newsnight the other night watching Smith himself. These people have lost the plot. They're being abandoned by the traditional Blair and Brownite leaders in the Parliament. There's no Andy Burnham. There's no Yvette Cooper. There's no Chuka Umunna. There's no Dan Jarvis. There's no Liz Kendall. All the people that became at least moderately well known in the country are nowhere in this coup. This is a second or third rank coup. This is a coup of the very lower grades. And you saw that in Smith's interview on Newsnight, and you heard it in Slaughter's interview with me tonight. They simply cannot stand up to examination. And, well, I mean, frankly, they'd be better chucking it now. They'd be better throwing in the towel. This entire thing was predicated on Corbyn not being allowed to stand. This entire coup was based on the possibility, they thought probability, that Corbyn would be unable to get the nominations, to get on the ballot paper. And when that failed because of an 18-14 vote on the Labour National Executive, all of their hopes were then pinned on a High Court judge. Now, the High Court judge had more sense than those leading the anti-Corbyn coup. The High Court judge knew that the consequences for British democracy, the consequences for the political system in this country would be so grave if a High Court judge threw the leader of the Labour Party out of his position. And the judge didn't take long to make up his mind, and he kicked it out the park. And the multimillionaire, Mr. Foster, probably won't even notice the bill, but it was a very, very, very big bill. Kira Robinson says, I think Hammersmith Andy, oh, that's his handle, at Hammersmith Andy, made a fool of himself on your show on Talk Radio. He's like most MPs now, they don't answer questions. And Josie says, that was brilliant. I found it funny. He must have thought he was on You're Being Framed. That's very good. Dominic Virgo says, this won't happen, hopefully, George. I think a political change is starting to happen, and Jeremy has brought that. Well, he has, you know. And it's got to this stage. What's that guy, the BBC's political correspondent? I can't remember his name. He's a nobody. He's sort of second in the tier on the BBC's political correspondent thing. He was up at Leeds filming a rally of supporters of Jeremy Corbyn that was, number one, packed to the gunnels. It was ecstatic in its spirit. His popularity vibrant, vibrating. The walls were vibrating with the support for Corbyn in this rally. And so, unable to deny that which was in front of his own eyes and in front of his own camera, he made a slight turn and said, well, you can see that a lot of Labour MPs are quite nervous at the personality cult that Jeremy Corbyn has built up. So, if you're unpopular, you're unpopular. If you're popular, you're a personality cult. The fact that there's no other politician in this entire country can fill halls from Land's End to John O'Groats with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of supporters. The fact that Corbyn now leads the biggest Labour Party that has ever existed on this island. The fact that Corbyn is the leader of the largest Labour and Social Democratic Party in the entire world, and all of it in just 10 months, in all of which 10 months he's been being stabbed in the back, in the side, and occasionally in the front by his own MPs. Just imagine if this coup, which has been a slow-motion coup, had not been mounted, and everybody had got behind Corbyn. Instead of 600,000 members of the Labour Party, you'd probably have 1 million now. And the polls would be better. And the meetings and rallies bigger, more vibrant. And the Tories would be knocking their knees together nervously. The other Harry Cole says they are mandated to do what their master says. The warmongering bloody corporatists. Andy Slaughter is just sheeple. And Sir Thomas Twaddle says the interview with Slaughter was astonishing. This is a so-called MP. He needs to think about retirement. Well, do you know what, Sir Thomas? I live in his constituency. Interesting. And Texter says, from a mobile number, no name, talk, excellent show tonight, George. I hear it's Tom in Halifax. Thanks for that, Tom. Michael in Leeds says, George, we want a good fight on the right. I hope the Labour coup realises it is doomed to fail. And Mr. Smith, the best candidate they can put up, asks Moses. Well, I've got to say, Moses, if you don't know, how can any of the rest of us? Damien, the legend, is in Brighton, and he's on the line. Damien, welcome.
Good evening, George.
Hi.
George, I wanted to talk about feminism in relation to the leadership contest. But could I just make a very brief comment about Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Now, his heart just wasn't in it, listening to him earlier. And he came across, if I'm going to be quite honest, as rather gormless. The plotters have sought to destabilise Her Majesty's opposition. So in that sense, it could be argued that they're actually in breach of their covenant with the constituents who voted for them, because those constituents voted for them to be returned to Parliament to oppose the Conservative Party.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something else, Damien. I'll let you back in a second.
Yeah, sure.
99% of them got elected because they were the Labour candidate. Not more than 1% of them got elected because of who they were. They got elected because they had a Labour rosette, period.
They were funded, supported, selected as Labour candidates, and this is how they repay that debt, George. But there's a positive side to this, because these dishonourable plotters have abdicated their duties. Of course, it leaves an excellent opportunity to ambitious, independent-minded Labour MPs who want to make a difference to fast-track their political careers and get some front-bench experience to prepare them for government. So we've already seen that one's returned, and there's some great career opportunities there for people who want to step forward and really make a difference in the country.
Damien, as always, absolutely brilliant. Thanks very much. Donald MacLeod writes, George, you could have given the poor fellow a chance to get off his stool. An early first-round knockout was too quick altogether. Well, maybe you've got a point there, Donald. Richard Tynes says, George, hope you and yours are well. Been a busy few months, but I'm enjoying putting my feet up and listening to talk radio tonight. Thank you, Richard. Stay in touch, pal. Don't be a stranger. The Duke says, hilarious, clearly only used to being stroked by the BBC. They don't like it up 'em. Well, some of them do, actually, Duke.